Hey, welcome to the Final Cut tutorial of the Southwestern Studios training course. Today we're going to be talking about Final Cut and organization of workflow and project management. So go ahead and open up Final Cut Pro, and the first thing you want to do is set your scratch disks. So go up to Final Cut Pro and System Settings. Shift Q is the shortcut for that, and we want to set our scratch disks and make sure they're not on the application drive and set it to an external drive. So we want to pick this. I've got a FireWire drive attached, and you always want to create a folder, especially if the drive is used by multiple people. Create a folder with your name. So I'm just going to call this Aaron's Projects. And go ahead and hit choose. And if you go back and look at your drive in the Aaron's Project folder, Final Cut automatically creates the audio renders file, capture scratch, and the render files folder. And what these are just folders that Final Cut uses to store your media when you capture stuff. So we've set our scratch disks onto an external drive. Just go ahead and hit OK. That's going to be the first step, is making sure your scratch disks are on something external and not on your application drive. It's always a good policy to not have your media on the same drive as Final Cut. So now the next thing you want to do is save your project. So I'll call this Workflow 1, and I'm going to go to Lumos. This is my external drive, and Aaron's Projects, and I'm going to save it right there. So you can see the Final Cut project is saved here in this Aaron's Project folder. Now I'm going to go back to Final Cut, and what you want to do is we'll bring up the log and transfer window, and you can do that by pressing Command Shift and the number 8, or go to File, pull it down here, the log and transfer dialog box, and that's going to come up with basically if you are attaching a P2 card through either a P2 reader or a Panasonic HVX or any of the Panasonic line that records on P2 cards, this is going to mount that media as a drive, and you can copy this media onto your hard drive. So I'm going to call this footage of door, and we'll go ahead and let that name it, and you can add this to the queue by hitting this button, or you can drag it down here, and that's going to just transfer this media into your capture scratch folder. So we'll jump back, and you can see here in capture scratch it's created a folder in the capture scratch for media, and it's called Workflow 1, just like our project, so it names everything the same for you. And there's our footage of door, and of course it puts it here in your browser so that you can be using it in your project. Now after you've created a project and imported media, specifically by either capturing it from a tape or from a P2 card, Final Cut will create this this folder here in the capture scratch, and you want to, after it's created this folder, take your Final Cut project file and put it in that folder. That way, if you need to transfer your project from say this drive to a computer with other internal drives, or if you want to copy it to another hard drive so you've got a backup, you can just grab this folder, and you know you've got your project file and all your media all within this folder. So going along that same train of thought, for instance, if you were to download a song and you want to use it, what you wouldn't want to do is, say, go to music and drag something into your Final Cut project file, because that's just going to be referencing this file here, which is, wherever it is on your computer, in the music folder, on the desktop, wherever. What you do want to do is copy it and navigate to your Capture Scratch folder. Go to the project where you're going to keep the media, paste it there. So then you've got that media actually in that folder, and then you can jump to Final Cut, and then you can import the media that's there in your Capture Scratch folder, and then you are referencing media that you have that you can move in that project. So that's kind of the very, very basics of project management. You always want to set your scratch disks, save your project, and then move it after you've created some media that Final Cut will create your folder with your project name, and then put the Final Cut project file into that folder so that you've got everything right here in this folder. So just to kind of demonstrate what that does is we've got all of our footage and the project file here in this folder, and then you can copy this to another drive. I'll just pop in, let's say, a flash drive here, and we'll let that come up right here, and then you can put that whole folder right there on that drive, and then you've got everything for that project, your music, your movies, and of course the Final Cut project file right here in this folder. And so you've got everything when you have to move it around. So that's kind of the basics. General other things to remember is just organize your bins. It may not seem like a big deal, but the bigger projects get, and especially if you're working or a student here at the studios, you'll get bigger and bigger projects, and you need to be able to find all your footage and media. And so I would just suggest that you carefully label things. I generally create bins for everything. So for instance, for audio, I'll create a bin. For footage, I'll create a bin. In footage, I may have several bins. So interviews, I may have B-roll, and just keeping everything organized so that you've got quick ways to reference all the different things, and especially if you label things when you import them, it'll keep it nice and organized. And then I generally have one more for sequence, or I prefer the term edits. And then just name your sequence, first cut, and then you've got everything here. And generally, while I'm working, anytime I make a major change or want to try something new, I'll just copy the sequence. So I've got the same thing, and then I'll just rename it. And then something that I learned that is kind of helpful sometimes is if you just keep your working edit out, then you can quickly reference, this is the one I'm working on, and you can see all your edits that you've made here. We'll get into editing in another tutorial, but that's just kind of the basics. Keep your bins organized, remember to save your project frequently, and then you'll be able to we'll go ahead and cancel since we've already saved that, and then we'll hopefully have a really nice, clean, organized, standardized system so that if you need to move your project, you can quickly and know that you've gotten everything. And it makes for really a rewarding editing process when everything is nice and neat. So there you go. That's our Final Cut organization tutorial for the Studios at Southwestern training course.